At 8:48 a.m. local time yesterday, a major magnitude 7.3 earthquake struck offshore of Mexico. Centered 80 kilometers west-southwest of the city of Tapachula, seismic waves radiated outwards in all directions, causing ground motion that in some spots on land was at least as strong as this simulation. This earthquake lasted for 24.2 seconds and was felt by tens of millions of people as far away as a part of Belize and even by some people in Mexico City. Since this represented the sixth largest earthquake in terms of magnitude to strike so far in 2026, you might have expected it to cause some localized heavy damage and at least a few dozen fatalities. And yet, there were thankfully no fatalities despite my and the US Geological Survey model's expectations, and while some minor and moderate damage did occur, the worst actual buildings seemed to have experienced in terms of damage was only minor. So, in my opinion, there were more than 1 million but less than 10 million US dollars in damage. The initial model, in my opinion, seems to have overestimated the intensity of shaking by around 1 MMI intensity in some areas, which might be the reason for this disconnect. But why did this July 17, 2026 earthquake occur in the first place? Simple. The fact that there is a tectonic plate collision ongoing offshore of southeastern Mexico. There, the north-northeast moving Cocos Plate is colliding with and subducting underneath the North American or Caribbean Plate depending on your interpretation of the region. The reason I say this is that the boundary between the North American and Caribbean plates is sort of a jumbled mess. Much of it does not seem to occur on a singular fault, as much like Iceland's Reykjanes Peninsula, it seemingly occurs across a zone of many faults that are up to interpretation. Thus, here are two possible interpretations I have showing the possible boundary of these tectonic plates. There isn't exactly a specific fault line at the spots I have labeled with a white line, as these white lines denote sort of a midway point within a broad region where the motion of the tectonic plate changes. This isn't too important for understanding why yesterday's earthquake happened, but I nevertheless thought it was interesting. Regardless of which interpretation is correct, over lengthy periods of time, generally decades to centuries, the pull of the downward-moving subducting slab can create compressional stresses on the overlying plate, also causing it to deform downwards. Eventually, this downward motion reaches a critical point, creating a major earthquake which causes the overlying plate to all of a sudden snap back upwards in what is known as a megathrust earthquake. Now, I want to note that some scientific literature only considers an earthquake at a convergent plate boundary with a subduction zone to be a megathrust if its magnitude was greater than or equal to 7.5 and occurred on the right area. Yet, the mechanism is the same for smaller events, just with a lesser motion and more limited extent of what does slip. The reason why no tall tsunami was generated is that the fault plane that slipped either did not reach the bottom of the ocean floor at all, or move there on such a tiny amount that the tsunami that was generated did not seem to achieve heights of any more than 16 inches or 41 centimeters. In the time since the major earthquake, an aftershock large enough to represent essentially the statistically most likely largest aftershock has already struck. Specifically, a magnitude 6.0 at 9:20 a.m. local time on July 17, 2026. I say this because the largest aftershock following an earthquake is on average about 1.2 magnitudes lower than the main shock. This is not always true, hence it being a mere average. Sometimes the largest aftershock can be notably lower or higher than this. And the occurrence of that aftershock does not prevent more similar or less likely larger magnitude aftershocks from occurring. I just thought it was an interesting fact. Aftershocks should decrease in abundance as time since the magnitude 7.3 earthquake increases. As a final note, I would like to thank this channel's patrons on Patreon and channel members on YouTube for supporting my work.